We're now about to tune into Folkways FM. So without further ado, let's try and pick them up. Hello, and the warmest of welcomes to July 2023's Almanac, where we muse over the heavens and the hedgerows for the coming weeks ahead. July, named after Julius Caesar. Old English, Efter Elitha. Manx, Jerry Sowry. Scots Gaelic, Intucha. Irish, Ual. Welsh, Gufanav. Cornish, Misgutherin. Again, listen to the similarity of those last two Brythonic languages there. Gufanav, Gutherin. For this show, let's think about weather predictions and the 15th of July, St. Swithins Day. You may know this day is connected to the weather, but why? And who is this lad St. Swithin? So the saint was Bishop of Winchester in the 9th century, and he was a big player in the religious and political life of Wessex. He died in 862, and he'd have likely faded from public memory if it hadn't been for the purported miracles that happened when his remains were moved on the 15th of July 971, over 100 years after his initial burial. According to legend, unlike other religious figures, he asked not to be buried in a prominent place within Winchester Cathedral, but rather outside in a simple tomb where, quote, "the sweet rain of heaven may fall upon my grave." About 100 years later, however, it was deemed unseemly that so holy a man should rest in a common grave with the plebs, basically. So the people of the time had his remains brought into the church to be enshrined there as a mark of respect. However, strange things began to happen upon this enshrinement, the most famous being it raining extremely hard for 40 days straight. Slightly wigged out by this, the church leaders decided to dig him up once again and move him back outside, poor old boy. And it was this very odd weather following the initial moving of his bones inside that has led to St. Swithin's Day becoming associated with the weather and making predictions about it. You may well know the old Scottish rhyme, "St. Swithin's Day, if thou dost rain, for 40 days it will remain. St. Swithin's Day, if thou be fair, for 40 days till rain nay mere." So this idea was already current in the early 14th century, and it has been proverbial ever since. Indeed, the 15th of July is the day we crane our necks to observe the sky even today, for whatever we see is an indication of the weather that will continue for the next 40 days. Why not have a go at this mid-month? Keep this tradition alive. Have a good old gawp at what the clouds are doing as you think for a moment about this bishop from Wessex who lived over 1,000 years ago. This is part of the great joy of stories. If they're good enough, they're interesting enough, in this case they're perhaps strange enough, they can live on in the popular imagination, leading us to remember figures that otherwise would likely have been lost to the sands of time long ago. If you woke up in Portishead at the beginning of July, you saw the sun rise at 4:58 and set at 21:31. Portrush, sunrise 4:50 and set at 22:09. And Perth, sunrise 4:28 and set at 22:05. A very important meteor shower begins this month, the Perseids. It begins on the 17th of July So this is the date of the new moon, so it's very favourable as the sky will be darker. The shower has its peak in mid-August, so we'll come back to the Perseids next month. The planet Venus is at its brightest during July. It is generally close to the Sun. At elongations in the evening or morning sky, it may be clearly visible after the Sun is set or before the Sun has risen. The planet's brightness is largely caused by its dense cloud cover, which completely hides the surface. Venus has been visited by many different space probes. Because the extremely dense atmosphere and heavy clouds shield the surface from direct observation, the atmosphere itself has been extensively studied. Surface observations have proved more difficult because of the dense cloud layers and have largely come from radar observations. What we've found is that the surface consists of remarkably uniform volcanic plains with few distinctive features. The highest region is about 11 kilometers high, where the temperature is approximately 380 degrees Celsius, with pressure about 45 times that of the surface of Earth. From a mythological point of view, Venus is of course goddess of love, beauty, desire, sex, fertility, prosperity, and victory. The Romans adapted the myths and iconography of her Greek counterpart Aphrodite for Roman art and Latin literature. In the later classical tradition of the West, Venus became one of the most widely referenced deities of Greco-Roman mythology as the embodiment of love and sexuality. So you can mull over Venusian themes, if you like, as you try and spy her planetary form in the skies this month. Other than that, the bright and shining star Vega is high overhead at the moment. Vega forms part of the constellation Lyra, which looks like a small slanted box and represents the musical instrument, the lyre. After hunting Vega down, close by, if you look, you'll see Hercules and Draco. Oh dear, we are now entering the dog days of summer. This period, from July the 3rd to August the 11th, is a period of summer said to be rife with malign activity and madness. The dog days are the hot, sultry days of summer. Historically, they were the period following the rising of the star system Sirius, known colloquially as the dog star, which was connected with heat, drought, sudden thunderstorms, lethargy, fever, mad dogs, and just plain bad luck. These days, we take this period more to mean the hottest and most uncomfortable part of the summer in the Northern Hemisphere. However, this period has kept this strange association with negativity, and perhaps because of their celestial counterpart, dogs in particular are said to run mad during this time. In Homer's Iliad, we have an interesting reference to the dog star. Quote, "Sirius rises late in the dark liquid sky. On summer nights, star of stars, Orion's dog they call it, brightest of all, but an evil portent, bringing heat and fever to suffering humanity." Coming down from the celestial to the earthly, for foraging this month, find cherry plums, raspberries, meadowsweet, red currant, wild radishes, and horseradish. July is said to be a lean time, sitting between the earlier flowering and then the later squashes that are still yet to come. This show's place of the month is a real hidden gem in County Sligo, Ireland, called the Fairy Glen. It's a tiny micro-valley etched into the side of Knocknarea Mountain, which hides another world. The mountain of Knocknarea itself, of course, is the legendary resting place of Queen Maeve, and a place filled with Irish lore. There's a beautiful and very popular walk to the mountain's summit. Once there, looking out at the top, you find yourself looking at the giant rocky cairn of Queen Maeve's grave, the largest unopened cairn in Ireland that is thought to conceal a Neolithic passage tomb. We're going to cover this enigmatic location in detail another time, likely on the Folkways main show, as there is so much to talk about here. But for now, it's the enchanting glen etched into the side of the mountain that we're going to have a look at. The Glen of Knocknarea is a very beautiful place, somewhat like a huge open-air cathedral. This large, natural, sheltered crack in the south side of Knocknarea was probably created by a fault line in the mountain when the glaciers were sculpting the landscape during the last ice age. County Sligo has some fascinating geological features, but the Glen is surely one of the most fantastic and underrated natural sites in the region. Let's see what William Bulfin had to say about this place in 1903. Soon after coming to the slope of the hill, you meet one of the wildest and most beautiful of glens. It is a wondrously romantic freak of nature, planted there in a cleft in the rock and walled off from the world, as if the Great Mother meant to lock it up and hide it away for her own use. It is thickly wooded, narrow and deep. The trees meet over the path in places, and the ferns touch you as you pass. The spirits of Knocknarea must love it here. One can fancy how they made it their own centuries ago. A mystic poet might dream his life away in it, holding communication with the hero dead of this area. And William is touching upon something there. As well as being beautiful, there's the undeniable sensation that you may have just stepped into some kind of a fairy tale. Entering the Glen transports you out of the modern world into a place that feels a million miles away. Tall walls of mossy rock trickling with water surround you, while an array of trees, shrubs and ferns creep up from the ground. The sounds from the world outside are silenced, leaving you alone in this wonderland. The Glen has an interesting relationship with megalithic sites as well. So the large limestone flag that covers the megalithic chamber at Listicule was quarried in the Glen. There are some monuments close to the Glen. The megalithic chamber at Primrose Grange is close to the east end of the ravine, and there are a number of medieval ring forts above the cliffs about halfway down the Glen. While cutting hazel for a Heritage Week project, what seems to be a megalithic chamber was also discovered in the lower part of the Glen itself, south of the entryway. This structure appears to be a similar structure to the early passage graves at Carrymore, just a few kilometres to the east. Finding the entrance to the Glen can be a bit of a challenge. There are no signposts or markers. The entrance point is now near impossible to see as the hedge and trees next to it are so overgrown. However, what you're looking for is a well on one side of the road, and opposite it, if you look on the other side, you'll see an overgrown path. There you'll see an old gate, and it's a pair of stone pillars, which again are easy to miss, that mark the entrance to the glen. A rough, narrow track then leads down through a wilderness of ferns and hazel thickets. You have arrived. July's poem is an evocative one by Carl Sandburg, born 1878. This is Backyard. Shine on, O moon of summer, shine to the leaves of grass, catalpa and oak, all silver under your reign tonight. An Italian boy is sending songs to you tonight from an accordion. A Polish boy is out with his girl. They marry next month. Tonight they're throwing you kisses. An old man next door is dreaming over a sheen that sits in a cherry tree in his backyard. The clocks say I must go. I stay here, sitting on the back porch, drinking thoughts you rain down. Shine on, O moon, shake out more and more silver changes.